Imagine packing your bags precisely once, then visiting, say, 2 dozen countries, the Arctic and Antarctic circles, 5 continents, and, for good measure, the Amazon. What may sound like wishful thinking when you say it aloud could actually be your reality on a world cruise, or at least one version of a world cruise. These days, there are countless options, with at least a couple that are bound to tempt you once you dig into the details of how it all works. Here to help us on that front is Kristin Viotto, a business development manager at Holland America Line, who's traveled to north of 100 countries by ship and who loves helping others get on board, as it were, with world cruising. Kristin Viotto, welcome to Well Traveled with AAA.
Thank you so much, Abby. Very happy to be here.
Well, very happy to have you. And first, let's start with just a broad strokes description of what a world cruise even is. How long a cruise are we generally talking here? And is there sort of a minimum number of countries or continents that make something a world cruise versus just a long traditional cruise?
Absolutely. It's a great question. I think that, world cruises have this sort of fantasy and idealism about them, but they kind of all run along the same links when it comes to days on the ship. So most world cruises are going to run north of 110 days. Some can go as long as almost 200 days for that. So you're definitely looking at between at least a minimum of 3.5, sometimes 5 or more months going to be at sea discovering these places. Some world cruises will start and end in 2 different ports, but some will actually circumnavigate the entirety of the world and come back to the same port as well. Normally, you're looking at least a minimum of 2 dozen and 24 countries, and sometimes even more along the 40 different countries, because world cruisers tend to like to say, if they go on a world cruise, they want to do something different the next time. So
Right.
cruise lines really go on try to keep it a little bit more variety.
Well, let's talk about some of the other things that distinguish world cruises from others. There are elements that really make the experience feel like a residency, right?
It's really funny that you say that. We do call our guests that come on board our ships residents when they come on, because it does become their home.
Uh-huh.
They're living there, they're going in and out, they're using it's a home base for their life on board a ship, in a sense. So, yeah, we do definitely call them residents on board, and they get to participate in things that you're not going to find on a 10-day or even a 14-day cruise.
What would be some examples of those kinds of experiences?
So, in general, you're going to see much more engaging and connected activities. So, for example, on a sea day, you might start your day off, if you're so inclined, of a more arts and crafts person, to go into a sitting group, or a sitting and knitting group, or possibly a book club. I know on the world cruises that we have on, we always have a morning lecture, bringing on lots of different experts and cultural and persons that actually know a lot about the culture in the morning. And then you'll possibly go to bridge lessons or go into a book club. So there's lots of different things that happen on these that require really connecting with other guests on board.
And if you're going to be gone from home for so long and, you're bound to be away over certain holidays, national commemorations, are those the kinds of things that you might be able to experience during your residency on board?
Oh, absolutely. Because, as you are on board for so long, it becomes your home, and we want you to be able to celebrate it just as you would at home. So whether it is going to be, maybe you're from Australia, there's a lot of Australians on board, we'll always try to have an Australia day. Or if you are of a religious aspect and there is a certain religious holiday, we on with Holland, we actually bring on different religious, whether it's Catholic priest, Jewish rabbi, Christian pastors, to ensure that you are comfortable in the fact that you're not missing out on that aspect of your daily or weekly connections with that. And then in addition, with the holidays, we do wonderful Easters and Valentine's Day. We really, really probably celebrate more of those
Uh-huh.
holidays on board than you may at home.
How fun. And are there certain kinds of excursions or onboard events that are generally reserved for a world cruise versus sort of a more traditional cruise?
Absolutely. That's a great question because some of these places you can go on to like on a normal cruise, like places in Europe or in Australia. But what we do what are called grand events. And these
Uh-huh.
events might be along the lines of renting out Ephesus for the evening.
Oh
And
my God. For
yeah,
for listeners who maybe haven't been to Ephesus, maybe you could just give them a sense of what it is and what it's like to have the place to yourself for the evening.
yes. Ephesus is actually an ancient city in Turkey. It is near to the port of Kusadasi. A lot of cruise lines will go there if you're doing any type of a Mediterranean. And it is a massive ancient city, known for its libraries, its intellectuals, its merchants. And it has even a large amphitheater. And during the day, it is no shade and very, very hot and
Uh-huh.
still absolutely amazing. But we rent it in the evening. So you're going to be able to have it in there and enjoy without sweating for the entirety of the evening, bringing on orchestras and having canapes and just getting the whole run of the place into the late evenings for that.
That must be so incredible. And you're bringing up another interesting point. When you are in a place like Ephesus, are you serving Turkish foods? And to what extent do local foods figure into the kinds of experiences that world cruisers might have?
Absolutely. Food is a part of the culture and it is a way to actually connect with people. I think food and travel are one of those things that really, if we embrace them, can really enhance your overall travel experiences. And when you're doing a world cruise, I think it's in and of its name, it's the world, right? So you want to be able to taste the world. So in Ephesus, Turkish delights and candies and meats and other Persian type foods. You can have, whether you're in New Zealand, bringing on wine and cheese, whether you're in Singapore, turning the entire Lido into a hawker center. Those are the types of things that you can find integrated into world cruisers, really bringing the ambiance and the food not only on shore, but also on board as well.
And how about the rest of the local culture in any given port that world cruises might call on? How much of that is incorporated into the world cruise experience?
It's absolutely essential. So one of the things is, you want to be a traveler. You don't necessarily want to get off and not have any appreciation or context or what it is that you're seeing. You can say, oh, that's nice and pretty, but you're not understanding the layers that go behind it. So I think it's really important to bring on local experts from that culture. So for example, if you're in Hawaii, bringing on native Hawaiians. If you're going to be in Japan, maybe bringing on a kimono maker. Those are the types of things that will really add value and that you'll more probably remember than just being able to get off and just looking at the landscapes.
And are people coming on board to, well, you mentioned the kimono maker coming on board. Are you having conversations with locals? Are you watching music and dance performances? What are the exchanges typically like?
Absolutely. So, for example, in Tahiti, we always bring on a local dance troupe, and then at the end, you're able to actually interact with them. Some of them speak English, some of them don't, and that I think
Mhm.
also adds to the value of those interactions and the authenticity of it. But what I really love is when we bring on my favorite thing was when we bring on like some of the scientists on board. So, for example, when we are going across the Pacific Ocean, we always bring on marine biologists and oceanographers and all kinds of those types of scientific STEM uh, sections. And the conversations that they have, I remember one year we had one of the best speakers I've ever seen, and she was a marine biologist and she studied sponges.
Uh-huh.
And every single one of her lectures was completely full in the way that she spoke and delivered. It was like a TED talk on sponges and
Wow.
starfish and octopus, everyone. So, but then she got so many people into snorkeling and wanting to go on excursions to see these things that were in the Pacific Ocean. It was fantastic to watch it unfold.
And how about sort of historians who might provide historical context for the kinds of places that people will be visiting, or people who are experts in the local culture? Is that part of the programming as well?
Absolutely. So we really try to bring on distinguished professors and local elders. For example, usually when we're doing one in New Zealand, we always bring on a tribe and an elder, and they'll do presentations on things that, you might see something in the land or some kind of statue or commemoration and think one thing, but again, having that deeper level connection with the land or with the culture, those elders and those local experts can be able to bring about kind of an eye-opening experience. So definitely bringing on professors and experts, whether it's World War II historians when we're in Japan and the Pacific and Okinawan Islands, or
Hmm.
whether it is going in and out of Indonesia, bringing on Dutch colonial professors talking about, the colonization of Southeast Asia. With that, again, it gives you a perspective and idea of what you're seeing is just one thing among many, many layers of what the culture is today.
Well, getting to experience all of these cultures and communities and habitats, the guests probably want to feel like they have some way to make a positive impact. Are there ways that that the ship helps make that happen?
There are. So, one thing that we do with Holland America that is one of the most memorable events that we do. We always will during one time, whether it's in Africa, sometimes India, and other places, we do a charity auction event, and whatever is raised in that event will actually go towards an orphanage in Namibia or schooling in Mumbai. And one great thing is that we have a very, very robust arts and crafts program, whether it comes to painting or creating crafts on board.
Mm-hmm.
And the guests actually, they'll take their paintings and they will auction them off to the other guests on board. And so that will actually incur a lot of wonderful funds that we can then be able to donate.
And how competitive do these auctions guests? I'm
You
so sorry. I'll re-ask the question. How competitive do these auctions get?
They can get very competitive, especially as some of the auctions are not necessarily things, they're experiences. So sometimes it can be dinner with the captain in his stateroom,
Uh-huh.
or it can be going down into the officer bar for an evening, which is normally not allowed. Or it can be one of the things that I remember most of when I was sailing on board one of the world cruises in 2019 was that my husband was on board as well. He's a drummer in the band,
Uh-huh.
and he was very much known by all the guests as for his very hefty appetite.
Uh-huh.
So he auctioned off a chicken eating contest. Who could eat the
Uh-huh.
most actually whole chickens?
Uh-huh.
And a guest ended up paying $300 to have a chicken eating contest in the dining
Amazing.
room with my husband. And he thought that he could win, but obviously he did not. But
Y-
it was
So
still
your
so much
husband was
fun.
the winner of that one, yeah?
Yes.
How great. And as guests become more comfortable with each other and and the crew and staff over the course of these very long cruises, do they, do the other kinds of activities become more sort of friendly and competitive? Like I think there's a trivia night. Is sort of how familial and competitive do the fun activities get after a while?
Yeah. So being together for 5 months, yeah, you can get really competitive, especially when it comes to trivia and bridge. So we
Uh-huh.
do bring on a master bridge instructor as well. And I always joke, and not it's not really a joke. It's absolutely true though. But you never mess with a couple of types of people. You never mess with trivia people, and you never mess with bridge people because they
Uh-huh.
do get so competitive, and
Uh-huh.
they're not winning anything either.
Uh-huh.
It's just for boasting.
Right.
purposes with that. But yeah, they do get very competitive. But it's also so great to see that kind of community evolving, not just with the guests and between themselves, but with the guests and the crew.
Mhm.
I know that sometimes when we're in Indonesia or Bali, that the guests are so keen to ensure that the crew will be able to get off because a lot of their families will be coming to the port. They'll wait for them to get off that. They'll post notes on their staterooms like, please do not touch my stateroom today. Go enjoy your time with your family. And that
Aw.
is always so warming to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of disembarking, do guests need to travel with the ship for the entire itinerary, or is it relatively easy to disembark someplace where you'd like to spend maybe a little bit more time on land and then catch up with the ship later?
It's absolutely possible. It just really depends on the country's rules. So, for example, if you wanted to get off in Sydney, Australia, and then take the GON train or another train and meet us in Perth on the complete opposite end of the continent, you can actually do that. You just really have to kind of work ahead of time and just to make sure, because we do, as the ship, have to put in a lot of paperwork to ensure that you're able to do that. Now, a lot of countries allow you to do that. Some do not. Because if you do enter on the ship, you have to leave via the ship. But there
Okay.
are a lot of countries that will allow that to be able to happen. So you do definitely don't have to stay on the ship. And even some of our guests, they like to take overland with us. So we do offer overland adventures in Africa or to Uluru or Iguazu Falls or Machu Picchu. So we also will facilitate those types of overlands adventures if the guest didn't wanted to do it with a group rather than just by themselves.
And so it does sound like world cruises do spend a bit more time in a given destination than maybe traditional cruises do. Is that right?
It's absolutely correct. And I think that's one of the defining features. Like you can be in Cape Town for 3 days or in Sydney for two. Late nights are very much more of the norm than the normal 8 to 3 or the 8 to 4 p.m. So you're always going to have some issues, when it comes to tides or federal regulations. But so having to leave at normal hours. But in the big ports, Singapore, Tokyo, Bali, Auckland, a lot of these places you can be expecting to have overnights. We even have an overnight next year in Easter Island, which I've never seen before,
Whoa.
and it's being able to be going there. That is one of my favorite things, but it is a tricky tender port. So if
Uh-huh.
you miss it one day, you have an opportunity to go the next day. So
Oh,
very exciting.
good. Oh, good. And for first-time world cruisers or those who are just considering it but may find some of the logistics sort of hard to get their minds around, how do you help them start to think about the nuts and bolts of doing this?
I think it's first kind of getting them, because people kind of look at it from a high level, like 5 months away traveling or 4 months or however many months. And I think kind of putting it down to a different level and being like, yes, it is that 4 months, but you can be able to take things and do little bits by little bits. So first off, people are always thinking, okay, my taxes, how am I going to do my taxes? Well, you can always apply for an extension, or one of the great things that we have nowadays is Starlink. So if you do TurboTax, you can do that easily on board.
Uh-huh.
And another thing as well is, pets. Pets is always a huge issue. If you don't
Uh-huh.
have family or friends that you can rely on, there's also lots of other services. I know a lot of our cruisers use trustedhousesitters.com
Hmm.
as a resource. There are lots of other ones that are out there as well. But it's like, yeah, it's do I have enough space in your passport? Well, you probably have too much space, which is why we need to go.
Yeah.
And then going into like, what about the mail? It's about the whataboutism. So it's kind of
Yeah.
addressing each of those as they come. We have a really great resource on our website that actually goes very in depth into each of these features.
And you mentioned having too much space in one's passport. How about thinking about how much space you're going to need in your luggage for all that time, and not just for the variety of climates you might be experiencing, but also the variety of events, because I think there are a lot of events that might require some unusual get-ups, huh?
It's so true. So we on Holland have themed parties, themed events, and we go all out, and our guests go all out. It's the best thing to see them enjoying themselves and really being engaging in it. So we'll have things like the Valentine's Day ball, but we also have the Kentucky Derby Hat Day, where people actually bring hats. We have a bowlers umbrellas night where the men wear bowler hats and the women bring these parasols from home. We'll have theme nights like discos and 80s and the Oscars. So there's a lot that you can do if you want to
Uh-huh.
participate. It probably will require a few more things than one suitcase, but we have a
Uh-huh.
feature called Luggage Direct. So we'll actually pack. You can pack your bags, 4, 5, 6 bags, and then you can ship them to the ship,
Oh,
and
wow.
we will actually put them in your stateroom. Now, depending on which stateroom you have will depend on how much storage space you have for those bags.
Right.
But yeah, that is something that is one of the best things I think about the world cruises is our themed event nights that we have. When it does come to some of our cruises, because we'll do a world cruise every year, which will normally be a round trip of the world, Fort Lauderdale to Fort Lauderdale, but we do have a pole to pole next year, which is you're
Mhm.
going to each of the different Antarctic and Arctic pole, but you're also going into the Amazon.
Right, right.
That's going to require a bit more strategic packing.
Yeah. And do guests, do World Cruise guests get sort of a suggested packing list that includes not just the kind of gear that you might need for the poles, but also you're going to want to bring a parasol, you're going to want to bring disco attire, sort of the specifics of the themed party wear.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually send a packet to the guests about 90 days to 120 days ahead, which will have the very large amount of shore excursions. It will have a list of the events that we're going to be having, and like you said, a packing list for the different destinations. Also, things that people don't think about: binoculars, battery chargers for your phone, making sure you have different plugs, especially if you're going on overlands, maybe in India or things like that. So those types of like things that you may not remember.
Right.
So we'll try to give you some of those tips as well.
Well, great. And just to finish up, I wanted to ask, what does well-traveled mean to you?
Oh, I think that travel is one of the rare things that gives us the opportunity to expand our worldviews. And it's just an invitation to really step outside of the familiar, and for all intents and purposes it gets you out of your own echo chamber, right? It you can be able to embrace the good, the bad, and the magnificence
Uh-huh.
of what we can experience as humans. And I think it really just it can nurture your empathy, your curiosity, and just allows you to absorb those diverse perspectives and those diverse cultures in a way that nothing really ever can or do until you have actually seen it and experienced it yourself.
Well, that's beautiful. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you again for having me. I really, really appreciate it.